Hello and welcome. I'm Chris Braitch, and this is the Seen and Heard podcast, a conversational series. I am an emotional health and leadership coach and co-founder of the not-for-profit Seen and Heard, which supports those seeking healing, connection, and systemic change. My vision is to move myself and the world around me towards connection and compassion. And each week, I will connect with amazing guests who are on their journey to bring about meaningful change in their own lives and the world around them. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. Welcome everybody to the Seen and Heard podcast, a conversational series. I'm delighted to be joined today by Robyn Harris. Robyn has been described as a wellbeing alchemist who brings a unique perspective to the process of wellbeing and dis-ease in our lives. Having worked as an interpreter for many years and having seen and experienced stress and burnout in herself and her colleagues, Robyn decided to look for ways in which she could support herself to let go of anxiety and the beliefs and fears that were holding her back, and allowing her to thrive. She now supports others by helping them to interpret the messages from their own body in order to find a deeper sense of understanding, clarity, and purpose. Using bespoke one-to-one coaching, energy-based techniques and workshops, Robyn has supported many women to rebuild their confidence, self-esteem, and resilience, allowing them to shine. Welcome, Robyn.
Thank you, Chris. It's great to be here. I'm so looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, you've been super patient, and thank you for that. So, we had busy summers and things that we've managed to tie up, and I'm really pleased. Especially after last night, you ran a brilliant free workshop for Seen and Heard that was focused on burnout, which we'll talk about later on. But had some lovely feedback this morning from the participants, and thank you for that time you gave.
It was a pleasure. It was a lovely group.
Yeah, that's cool. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. And but I'd like to start the podcast by connecting in like how we know each other, how we came across each other, this sort of synchronous stuff that happens. But I think for us it was a group I'm on because of emotional freedom technique, tapping EFT that I practice. That's called Metta Consciousness. So we'll talk about Metta later, but. I put something out there because actually my partner's pet was really, really struggling, and the vets had given up and ran out of ideas, and sort of modern veterinary stuff just wasn't working. And so I reached out into that group to see if there are options. And your name came up as someone who works with people and with animals. So that was our connection, wasn't it?
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's a common situation that you described there, not just for animals, but for people as well. We go to the doctor perhaps, and they're not able to give us anything further once they've tried the options that they're aware of, which is usually medication of some kind. They then struggle, and we can feel really stuck and feel like we've run out of options, like we've tried everything. I know that was certainly an experience I went through. But I want to share that there's so much more we can do, that we can do for ourselves, and that we can take back that sense of agency rather than feeling powerless.
Yeah, very powerful in itself is to it's not so much control, but certainly a sense of agency over our own lives and our own health. And I'm looking forward to unpacking that today. But thank you for your help with Muffin the cat. It's an ongoing journey with his health. But it was lovely to know there were other options. So let's get into it. And first thing I always like to understand is a little bit about where my guest has come from in their life, and that means we begin at the beginning. So how were your early years? What was life like for you growing up?
Well, I was born in 1968 in Belfast, and that was, for anybody who knows the history of Belfast, right at the very beginning of what's known as the Troubles. And I was raised Catholic in an area that was predominantly, if not all, Protestant. So I didn't really understand until I got to about the age of 8, which I look back and think, how on earth was I living in ignorance of the differences and the separation between the two sides of society for that long? But I didn't live in the worst part where there was the riots at night and by the peace line, the Falls Road, the Shankill. I didn't live that side of the city. So I grew up quite insulated from that initially. But then I began to realize that there are two sides to the world in which I'm living. And so I felt like a bit of an outsider because I was in the minority in the area that I was living. Also, my home life was rather volatile because my dad, we didn't ever have an official diagnosis, but it looks like he may have had something like schizophrenia. He had schizoid tendencies, my mum was told when she looked into it. And so, yes, home life was volatile. And I think myself, my mum, and my brother, we walked around on eggshells a lot of the time, not wanting to get on the wrong side of my dad's temper. And that led me, that kind of background led me to becoming shy, introverted, afraid to speak up, afraid to be seen at all. And that kind of stayed with me through my primary school years, my secondary school years, and on into when I then went on to university and got a job. And I can see so many patterns playing out, even though there were times when I was quite ill and then recovered and thought, that's it, I've moved forward, I've improved, I've grown up, I've changed, I've learnt strategies to support myself. But then later I went into burnout for a second time. So I realized maybe I haven't learned quite as much as I thought. I'm still not maybe getting to the crux of the issue. I'm not supporting myself as well as I need. There are still elements that I'm carrying with me. And before we came live, you mentioned the book by Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score. My body was still carrying quite a lot of scores that it hadn't yet processed. So, yeah, I think that's kind of my journey. That's where I've come from and how I got to the beginning of then transitioning into looking at how can I take better care of myself. Those were kind of the motivations behind that.
Thank you, Robyn. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And, without getting into the politics of it, the religion of it, growing up in a segregated society, now you've got a really great understanding of trauma, of healing. For the communities you grew up in, what is the trauma, the generational stuff that's going on there? What are people carrying from growing up in really, at certain points during that period it was a war zone? Yeah. Can you speak into that?
From what I could see, and every person's perspective on this is going to be different, but my perception of it was there was a lot of anger, a lot of hatred, but underlying that, there was a lot of fear and a lot of history. So my brother talks about a documentary that he saw. This is going back a long time now, but you may know that on the 12th, Protestants gather at the site of the Battle of the Boyne, and they celebrate the 12th of July, known as Silly Season back home. And in Belfast, they would paint the paving stones red, white, and blue to represent the Union Jack. And they would march with their big lambeg drums, and they'd beat those, and they'd march through Catholic areas. But anyway, one year they did this documentary. They went to the site where they all gather in the field, and they were asking people, why are you here? And people were just saying, 1690. Okay, can you tell us? We're not from this area. We don't know the history. Can you tell us more about what happened? 1690. That was as far as they got. And this is, being told second, third, fourth hand. I didn't see the documentary myself. And then for years, there was a banner up on the City Hall in Belfast saying, Belfast says no, where other areas of the world were having rebellions and uprisings to try and change things, to overthrow a government that didn't allow freedom of speech and so on. Whereas Belfast was just saying no. It just felt like such a dead-end decision. So there was no thought for the future. There was no thought of change. There was no thought of how do we move on? How do we change? How do we make reconnections? And that's not to say that there was nothing happening, because I was part of various groups that was trying to effect change. But the majority still seem to be saying, we say no. It's saying no too. It's effectively saying no to a better future for everybody. And it just felt so restrictive. And growing up, I just wanted to get the heads of the people on either side and bash them together and say, why are we doing this? We're all Irish people living on this piece of land. And they would have disagreed and said, no, we're British. Going into the politics to that degree. But I just felt we're all here. We're all human beings. Whatever nationality we choose, we're human beings. We have more in common than we have difference. Let's get along. Let's explore why, what are we carrying, and how can we support ourselves? What is the underlying need behind the emotions that are so strong? And I've since learned the concept that if we don't own our emotions, they own us. I think that was very much, and not necessarily was, but in some cases still is, going on in Northern Ireland. And that to me is just so sad, because I think you cannot thrive when you're living in that kind of an environment. You cannot know yourself. You cannot be who you were here to be when all you feel is anger and bitterness and hatred and fear.
Thank you, Robyn. Yeah, really beautiful words. And just what came to me as you're speaking is that, they say that kind of when you're traumatized, you just have that black and white binary thinking. Everything is us and them. Everything is black and white. There's no shades of grey. There's no sort of neuroplasticity, no flexibility. And so ultimately, the generations that had been traumatized, and we talk a lot because this is, seen in the head. There's that connection with the boarding schools, with the empire, and what the British Empire did, marching around the world, effectively crushing indigenous populations into a kind of a very rigid box, using the boarding school system as part of that, and the church as another part of that, etc. But that left this legacy of traumatized generations who were in this very then binary black and white thinking. So as you say, they didn't know. This was at the most subconscious, generational level, this trauma, and so they're standing in a field saying, the one thing they've been told to say as to why we're all angry. But it's very difficult.
I do a lot of work with the deaf community, and I used to work at Bristol University, and they talk there about colonisation of our minds. So you're talking about colonisation in terms of peoples and nations, but also it was a colonisation of the mind. And deaf people have experienced that from the hearing population, similar to the Native Americans in America, where they were taken from their families and educated in a white man's system. Deaf people are taken into mainstream schooling and educated through speech, and not given often the opportunity to learn their own language, sign language. And deaf schools have been closed. And I know that there's a lot of push for mainstreaming for certain groups, because then they're more integrated into society, hopefully more seen as, well, they're just one of us. But deaf people aren't disabled, despite how the society tends to set up systems. You're a deaf person, therefore you're disabled, therefore you need support, rather than you're a linguistic minority. How do we put language in place for you? And then the field can be equal. So, yeah, it's just really interesting to think about that, and then think about, well, we're all conditioned. So in that sense, we can all be colonized internally, in our thinking, in our systems, in our ways of being. And I think what Metta offers is that opportunity to break out and think, who am I as an individual? How do I live as an individual? A society that wants us to be that rigid, homogenous group, because it's easier, isn't it? If we're all the same, the systems can just be there. They don't have to be individualized. They don't have to be tailored. They can just be one size fits all sausage factory. And it's so much easier and cheaper. It actually isn't, because in the long run it doesn't serve people well. So then we have to have a sick system to take care of all those people who are struggling in a system that doesn't fit them.
Thank you. There's a couple of things there brilliantly put that we'll come back to. One is Metta, one is the sick system, rather than, say, people call healthcare or the health system. Yeah. So yeah, we'll definitely circle back on that. But your work with that was very powerful. What you were saying about the deaf population, and you mentioned that as a child you very much walking on eggshells, retreated within yourself, very shy. What brought you through then to being so passionate about working and advocating for deaf people?
I think when I was very small, it started when I was about 3, according to my mum's description. There was a boy who lived further along the road from us, and he was 6, but he was deaf. And at that stage, he didn't have sign language, he didn't have speech. And we played together because we were the only children of similar age on the street. So my mum thinks that sowed a seed for me, because speaking to him wasn't going to work. He didn't have sign language, so we would just gesture. And when you're a tiny kid, it's just about, oh, this toy, I'll have it now, and we'll play, and we'll point and make our own form of understanding each other. It's not a big deal. And then years later, showing my age again, there was an art program with Tony Hart that you may have seen, some listeners may have seen, called Vision On. And occasionally there was a deaf woman on that. And I think I was just entranced as a shy, introverted child who was not comfortable in speaking out. There's a language where you don't have to speak. You don't have to make any noise. You don't have to be heard to be heard. Mm-hmm. You can express yourself, and sign language is beautiful at expressing emotions. My spoken language, I couldn't use it for that. I needed to express what I was feeling. I couldn't do it that way. But here was another option, a very beautiful, very expressive, very graceful option. And I was, I think, entranced. And then when I got to 16, 17, I took a book out of the library, which was Signs, and I learnt it cover to cover, not realising that it was American Sign Language, which is completely different to British Sign Language. Not only that, but I had nobody to use it with. And a language is one of those use it or you lose it things. So that was a bit, not a waste of time, but it was a bit like, oh, I felt my pancake had gone well and truly flat. And then we had a newsletter that advertised sign language classes, just a taster, 7-week course. And I persuaded my mother to drive me across town 1 evening per week. And I was hooked. And that was it. I started learning sign language. My mum, bless her, she looked into all the places where I could use sign language, which in Belfast at the time was basically 4 churches. This is Ireland. It had to be based on the church. Mm-hmm. One of them was Catholic. And the other 3 were various branches of the Protestant church. The Catholic ones didn't get back to my mum, so I ended up being a regular attendee at the Presbyterian church, keeping it very quiet that I was Catholic. The minister knew, but further up the chain they didn't know. And I ended up then working at that church for a couple of years, and those were the best years of my life. I loved it there. And then I couldn't train any further. I'd gone as far as I could in Ireland at that time. So I came to Bristol University to train to become an interpreter, which is where the interpreting in the introduction came from.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that journey. It's really, really beautiful to hear about your relationship with the boy up the street and that sowing that seed. And yeah, I mean, we know that the majority of communication is non-verbal, isn't it, between human beings? It's energetic, it's facial expressions, it's all sorts of things. We'll come on to the energy bit because I'm passionate about that. I know you are too. But also what I took away really was also certainly the very English speech sort of way of speaking, patterns, etc. It's all on the stiff upper lip, if you like. It's all very rigid. You go to parts of Europe or other parts of the world, it's very expressive. The hands are going, more's going on. Well, very good. So, I just thought, it's actually a bit, it's not much fun, is it? Whereas I watch signings sometimes when you watch your program and, the signing's going on. And I end up just watching the signing, even though I don't understand it, because it's fluid, it's moving. My attention span's not great. It holds my attention better. Sometimes someone's speaking and the voice, it sort of tunes out. I can't help it. And I have to say to myself, come back, come back, come back. So, I think there's so much there about, traditionally as well, we had, 194,000 years of human beings where there wasn't a huge amount of verbal stuff going on, that it really built over time. Much of it was physical, it was energetic, it was sign, it was, just different ways of expressing. So lovely to sort of bring that into the podcast. But you mentioned something there that was sort of brought us nicely on your journey. So, you're Bristol University, you're studying, and you mentioned this walking on eggshells, this shyness that you sort of this survival strategy that you needed at home as a young person. How did you're building your life here? How did your early years stuff start to show up? And how did you start to realize that there was something in the body that you needed to process this?
It was an interesting couple of years. I did a diploma, so it was a 2-year course, and it was a vocational course, which Bristol University, being one of the kind of ivory tower universities, wasn't terribly keen on, and actually phased it out in the end, even though it became a degree before that. But when I was there were approximately as many deaf people in the department as hearing people, which was amazing. Obviously, if you're learning a language, the best way to learn is to be immersed in it. So between staff and students, it was about 50-50. It was an amazing environment in which to learn. We had some of the top people in the country, if not the world, teaching us. And they were doing the research themselves, whereas there were other centres in the UK that were teaching as well, but they were using our research or research from America. There's a much greater corpus of work there. So we used to sit around, us students, and think, we're really struggling. We're losing our sense of self-worth and ability to do this job when we come out at the end of the course. Why is that, when we've got such great wealth of learning and teaching that we're benefiting from? And there just was something, when you talk about energetics, there was something going on between the university and our department and within the department, that there was a lot of that crab theory going on where people just pull each other down. They don't let each other build up, and people were siloing themselves. It was a siloed department within the university because of that vocational thing, but it was also people were siloing themselves. There's too much going on. I'm in too much overwhelm. I just need to put blinkers on, head down, push on through. So I could see this going on for all of the students and all of the staff. And I later actually came back to work there, so I saw it even more. So there was whatever it was going on, and we were all feeling really depleted. And then when I came back to work there, the person who was in charge of the department was my line manager. They were not good at people skills. It was quite well known across the university. Fine outside of work, but in work, whether they were really pressured, whatever was going on, they did not have good people skills. And so I just retreated more and more and more and more and more into my box. And he actually put me in a box because I was in a shared office, and he put screens up around me so that I couldn't be seen, because I was there as the interpreter and I had to make phone calls and so on. And I should not be seen because my phone calls should be confidential. Never mind, all of the other people in the office didn't sign well, but they could hear. So half of my conversation is going to be overheard anyway. But then somebody else came and rescued me and told him that was totally inhumane and to take those walls back down again. But that was just one example. And that it all left me shrinking into myself. And people were commenting on how my health was deteriorating, my way of being was deteriorating, my mood, everything was just going downhill. And I remember one of my friends in that office asking me, "How are you feeling?" And I just said, "Honestly, I feel like I've been scraped off the bottom of somebody's shoe. That I've been trodden on, that I've been squashed, that I'm distasteful, that nobody wants me." And there were various kind of inner politic things going on, and I ended up, my husband said to me, "You've had a sense of humor bypass. You're not the person I met, fell in love with, married." Eek. That gave me a swift kick up the behind. So we discussed it and I left and I became freelance. And because I'd been the one interpreter at that time, they later got more, I was the one interpreter for 10 deaf members of staff. So it went from all or nothing. There'd be days when you were sat there twiddling your thumbs and days when they all wanted you all at the same time. And there were financial issues because it was funded by Access to Work, Department of Work and Pensions. So I just felt like it was a no-win situation and I was fast heading for burnout. I was suffering a lot of things like migraines every Friday, eczema, irritable bowel syndrome. The doctors were telling me I was borderline for diabetes, borderline for rheumatism, borderline for fibromyalgia. I was, not very well at all. And so I recognized I'd had ME before I recognized I was heading down that path again. And as I said, I left. And then they employed me on a self-employed basis. And I suddenly realized I'm the person here in charge of what I do. I have agency back. Before I felt I couldn't speak out because of all those things coming back up again. Now I was able to take that step, having decided I'm going freelance and getting booked, getting work, having that proven to me that actually I was doing a good job. Mm-hmm. Then I could go back into the department and just stand my ground and speak up against behaviours that before I had just said to myself, I can't speak out against these, I just have to take them. So that was a big part of my switch.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Very powerful move. And, sometimes out of these key events, whether it's workplace stuff, relationships, physical health, mental health, there is that kind of collapse, but then there's the building back up afterwards, the breakdown and the breakthrough. I certainly have had a couple of those myself, as you know. And but you touched on something there that will lead us into talking about Metta, which I really want to talk about. But you mentioned Bessel van der Kolk's brilliant book, Body Keeps the Score, many others around like that, but that was a real kind of landmark one. And you talked about there the amount of health conditions that were showing up in your body, particularly inflammatory conditions and autoimmune conditions, things like that. Myself, Crohn's, rheumatoid arthritis, they've reflux, all sorts of things where my system just was so stressed for so long, it just ate itself, just fell apart. This was in my 20s, it didn't take till really very long adulthood. So before we move into Metta, which it can be seen as very much the understanding and a healing path, let's just touch on how stress, how battleground childhoods, and then what we carry out into the world, how that starts to cause physical symptoms and breakdown. Can you just speak to that?
That is going to bring Metta into it, but you touched on it and our language does, which is where language can be so beautiful. I love language. Being an interpreter, I explore language and I play with language. But how we use language and the phrases that have become cliched or idiomatic, they've done that for a reason, because they resonate for us and because there is a truth in them. So you said that your body was eating you. And we talk about, I'm eating myself up about something. And that gives away how our body is actually interpreting, responding to, attempting to address issues. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, it's a really good way to start exploring. What do I say? How do I? Because we don't always all use that terminology. But if it is a common one that we use, that's a kind of little light bulb, alarm bell. Ooh, pay attention. Your body's letting you know how you perceive something. So when we have information coming at us, we perceive that in the same way as we perceive food. We talk about, I've bitten off more than I could chew. I had to chew that over. That was really difficult for me to swallow. I couldn't stomach it. It was, and if I can kind of swear briefly, it was shitty. And that gives us an indication of how we've perceived something and where our body is attempting to work on it. So with The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk showed us that parts of the body will take on a role of addressing something. So maybe your shoulders, because you're carrying a heavy burden, and they're tensing up because that's tough and it's hard, or we're perceiving it as hard. We're perceiving it as deeply challenging. So our shoulders, and I was always somebody my mum would always say, your shoulders are up around your ears. But our stomach can respond to things. And in Metta, we talk about how it can be metaphorical like that. It can be literal. So if you think of in the wild, because we're all just animals and we respond in that mammalian way, in the wild, if there was a wild cat maybe that had swallowed a chunk of bone that was too big to pass all the way through its digestive tract, if it maybe was going to get stuck at the bottom of the stomach, then its stomach would respond by secreting extra acid to break down the bone so that it could pass on through and the animal will survive and be healthy. The body is always seeking to do that. There's always a purpose behind the responses and the reactions and the processes that it performs. So if we think of that for a chunk of bone, we can kind of get that. It's a solid thing. But the same is true for information. So if I have that information that I can't stomach, that's what my stomach is doing. And if you think about Chinese traditional medicine, they talk about qi, energy, and how energy gets stuck in the body. And that's how we perceive it in Metta, that everything that comes at us has an energy. And we then deal with that energy. Our body deals with it in some way, and it's generally, as I'm saying, a metaphorical way. So the energy comes in, we process it, and hopefully we take on board what it has to offer us and we move on. But if it's something that it's unexpected, it feels dramatic subjectively to me as a unique individual, I feel completely isolated. I can't talk to anybody about this. I don't know what to do with it. And I have no strategy in this moment. It gets encapsulated in a ball of energy and it gets put in the place in the body that feels the most appropriate. So if it's information that I can't stomach, it goes to my stomach. If I couldn't swallow it, and we talk about feeling like you've got a lump in your throat, or if it feels shitty, it goes further down into the intestines. Or if it's something you've heard, it'll be in your ear. Something you've seen, it'll be in your eye. If it's about how strong and capable and able do I feel, it'll be in the bones or the fascia or the muscles or the ligaments, those structural tissues. So when something is held in the body, it's held because there is a learning in there for us. It's like A.H. Almaas says that your pain is your pain. Nobody else will have the pain that you have. But that is sent to you by the part of you that loves you the most. Because it's the only way it has to communicate, going back to language and communication. The body can't speak to us in words. The only communication it has is how we feel. Physical sensations, emotions. So when we feel pain, and we feel pain whether it's physical or emotional in the same part of our brain, but that pain is there to kind of go, please pay attention. I've got something amazing to share with you. And this something will help you to be more fully who you were born to be. Please, let's sit down, let's dialogue, let's explore this together. Let's work together on this. Whereas the way that our society teaches us push on through is actually forcing us to ignore, to work against the wisdom that our body holds and carries for us. Because it's very biological. It doesn't make mistakes, it doesn't go wrong, it doesn't attack itself. So autoimmune is kind of a misnomer. It's just the body's made changes, but it's making changes because it's in stress. And when we can understand that and we can start to look at the changes it's made and why, that gives us the information on what's the need, what's the emotion, what's the need behind the emotion, how do I address that need? And again, I can take my power and agency and address that need for myself. And that doesn't mean to say I have to do it alone. My need might be to make connections, to ask people for support. Kelly Turner wrote the book Radical Remissions, and she talked about the 9 common features amongst people who had and experienced a radical remission, one of which was about the community, the support network that you have around you, those connections. Also, another one was that sense of something greater and bigger than you. So that spiritual element to your life. And I've just been listening to Bruce Lipton's The Biology of Belief. And he talks about that big time. He's been voted the world's most spiritual man as a scientist, a cellular scientist. So it's a great book. I highly recommend it. But that's the meta concept, and that's what our body wisdom actually offers us. That learning, that potential to be who we were born to be, rather than just another sausage in the sausage factory.
Thank you, Robyn. Got a lot of emotion coming up there. I feel something very deeply when I know someone is speaking the truth, and I connect with your truth there. I think, ultimately the sort of dissociation that comes with trauma, so from a psychological perspective, really moves us often, straight up into the sort of left. We just live a left brain life. We're like a floating head. We're not connected to our body in any way. And we believe in, mental health and physical health, and not a super system that is interconnected. And therefore we become disconnected from the world. We're supposed to be independent when we're actually supposed to be interdependent. And all of these sort of isolationary factors, or the way we treat things in modern medicine, etc. But really beautiful that you talk about this pain, this symptom, let's call it, as a signpost. And that's what I call it in the work that I do, emotional freedom technique with clients. I know where they're going to tell me the pain is before they tell me, because they'll start sharing. Again, like you say, so this, something was said at work. I just couldn't hear it. And it was making me feel sick. I'm like, right, let's meet that in the gut where it lives. But we're taught to disconnect from body, from each other, from planet. So thank you. Metta itself, then, you mentioned metta, and then you mentioned metaphor. Just what does metta stand for? What, is it an acronym? Is it a word in itself?
It's a word in itself, and it basically means overarching.
Right.
So Metta Consciousness is that overarching consciousness, awareness, understanding of who we are and our relationship to the world around us. That interdependence, the interconnected and interconnectivity, interdependence that we share. We are all just parts of this whole amazing life. And there are lots of different ways of looking at that. There's the holographic universe, we're all drops in the ocean, etc. But we really are interconnected and interdependent. So as soon as one thing changes, everything changes. And I loved, is it Brian Cox, the scientist guy on the telly, and he's not woo-woo. He will say very much he is not woo-woo. But there was one episode of one of his programs I was watching a while back, and he said, as soon as I do this, I change every single electron in the whole of the universe. Yeah. I love that stuff that's all really mind-blowing and quantum physics and all of that stuff. Not that I understand it at all, but I just love having my mind blown, because it's that concept of the world and life is so much bigger than we appreciate and understand. And we can move to having that greater understanding, and we can hold those concepts even though we don't understand them. And we can play with them and experience what that does. And that sense of opening up to possibility and potential, and how that raises us up through the vibrational levels, that we can switch from despair to joy. We can hold both. One we know is the lowest vibration, the other the highest. And as human beings, we can actually hold both. But we can choose which one to engage with at what time, when we know we have that kind of agency. And we know that joy and love and gratitude, they're healing, whereas the others aren't. And
Thank you.
these are the things that I've come to realize, because, you read these things. I read them for years, and right. So not my experience. I can't relate to that. But then when you something happens and something shifts and a penny drops and something clicks, you realize that it really can be that simple. It's just how we look at things. So that's why I love quantum theory, because I'm all about perspective and how we see things and how we can play with that, and how much choice and agency we actually have in that, and how you can just 1 minute be looking this way and then another look that way, and it's completely different. I love those little diagrams where you've got two guys standing and there's something drawn on the floor, and one guy's saying it's a 6 and the other one going, no, it's not, it's a 9. Because it is so much about how we look at things, and we can get to walk around and see all the different perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful. As you say, if you go up above that, you can see both the 6 and the 9.
Yeah.
So, but you have to step away, don't you, to the helicopter view. So, well, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So, with now much better understanding of Metta, what I'd love to do, just for a couple of minutes, is to give an example, because I found the first time I heard of Metta, I needed an example. You've given a couple there, but I can't stomach it. I was working with a client the other day, and she felt this enormous, heavy burden of responsibility for the emotional range of her family. And she was, of course, carrying it where you carry heavy stuff all across her shoulders, across the back of her neck, migraines, etc., tension. And I know that when I was first exploring Metta, I was looking very much at for a client who had skin conditions, eczema, etc. And that's very much that's the barrier between you and the outside world. What is it in your environment that is causing some damage, some irritation? So the barrier between yourself and the outside world, as an example, when I was first looking into it. Can you explain a little bit more about how this energy from incoming information you've talked about gets stored in different parts? But how does it show up, so that people can connect to sort of symptoms and things like that?
Following on from what you were saying there about skin conditions, I'll give you an example of mine that's a reasonably recent one. So I mentioned I'd had eczema years ago as part of my journey, but then it cleared and I didn't have it anymore, and that was wonderful. And I used to get it on the insides of my hands, on my feet, and on my eyelids, which was an interesting one. But recently, I had eczema on the back of my hand. So this was my opportunity to explore what was going on. And I know in Metta that we look at the 2 phases. Each dis-ease has 2 phases. So we're coming along just in normal health, day-night rhythm, so energized in the day, rest and repair overnight. And then something happens that, as I mentioned earlier, is unexpected, dramatic, isolating, and we feel we have no strategy. So UDIN, we call it a UDIN. And at that point, we go into fight or flight. We go into what I call mobilized. So our body is taking action to try and support ourselves, try and get ourselves through. And it's called the stress phase. So we might be doing things like feeling restless, not sleeping very well, cold hands and feet, wanting that quick energy. So reaching for the chocolate biscuit, reaching for the cup of coffee. But all of those things are biological. They're serving a purpose for us. We have cold hands and feet because our blood is being redirected to the vital organs, ready for that fight-flight response. So the heart, the lungs, the muscles, so that we can take that action. And it's shutting down or moving away from our digestive areas, our extremities, because they're not important when we just need to survive. So we might get butterflies in the stomach. We might lose our appetite. But we are reaching for the quick fix energy because we want to fuel that fight or flight. We might feel restless again because our body's trying to take action. And this is where sometimes it doesn't serve us in today's world, because we don't want the mobilized action. We want the clear thinking. So if my computer goes down, that is a big stress for me, tech, then I don't want to be fighting my computer. I don't want to be running away from my computer. I want to be able to see clearly and to think about what's going on here, not lose my executive functioning and just want to run away. Going back to the eczema I experienced, the stress phase symptoms, we might also be feeling that we can't sleep very well because, again, our body's just trying to keep us awake longer, to have a longer period of time to work things out. We might also be video looping for that reason. It's when we then are able to release that stress, so changes are happening to support us during stress. When we release that stress, that's where most of our symptoms come up. And that's how it is with the skin. So the skin is all about contact and connection, and also about separation. If we have an issue on our skin, it's either because there's a touch that we want that's missing, and we're missing that touch, or a touch that we don't want that we're having and we want to get rid of it. Either way, the skin's response to that is to go thinner because it wants to numb out, which is a typical thing that we do in fight flight, because we don't want to feel pain, we don't want to stop fighting or fleeing if we're injured. So we numb by thinning the skin. When we're then able to release the stress, address the stress, go into that regeneration, the second phase of the dis-ease, we need to repair, we need to get back to homeostasis and balance. So where the skin is thinned, it seeks to repair itself, to grow back, to thicken back up again. And this isn't something we can see with the human eye unless it becomes a very chronic state for the thinning. But we can see when it starts to grow back, because say you cut your hand, you cut the skin on your hand. When it's healing, what does it do?
Just clots and then starts to scab over and etc.
And how does it feel? How does it look?
Itchy. Yeah, it looks a bit grim. It's a bit itchy, it's tingly, and then flaky, etc. Yeah.
It's red, it's inflamed, it's itchy, it's scabbing over. How does eczema look?
Same.
Yeah. So eczema we think of as flare up of eczema. I must be really, really stressed. Actually, it's the regeneration phase of that dis-ease. So I was able to look at my hand, which was red and itchy and flaky and all the rest of it, and think, oh, I've gone into regeneration. What was the stress I was holding? So I know it was a stress around contact that I wanted but didn't have, or didn't want but was having. I know that it was something about this area of my body, literally or metaphorically. What happened? What happened just before I started to experience those symptoms? And what might have happened before that relates to those issues that put me into stress? I know what it was. I got a message from somebody who I see as a very respected, further advanced person in a particular area, who said, I'd like a word with you. Immediately pushed me back into my default, oh, what have I done wrong? So my skin is going, oh, my wrist is going, I'm going to get slapped. That's what this is. I'm going to get a slap on the back of the wrist. So my skin is thinning because I don't want that slap. And then I had the chat with the person. They wanted my advice. Duh. There was me stressing for no reason. I can let that go. My skin repairs. Oh, I've got itchy, red, flaky skin. So that was my example.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a really clear example. I know, and for anyone interested, we won't have time to unpack it today, but to have a look at Metta, Meta, and yeah, I found it. I'm not deeply knowledgeable in it, but because I'm an emotional freedom technique EFT tapping practitioner, it comes up ultimately in that we follow the energy, or we chase the pain, as they call it. So we just find where thoughts, emotions, beliefs show up in the body. We tap on a series of acupressure points, and we chase them around until we get some clarity. And you always do. And there
the body
is always
knows.
the body knows. It's trying to, as you say, I think the biggest thing to take away from today is, you said it to me in the intro and I loved it. Your body isn't broken. It's just asking for attention. It's asking to you to focus on a particular area. So that pain, that discomfort, that symptom is saying, hey, look, there's something here worthy of your attention. So thank you so much. And I know, for anyone go out there and explore Metta, it's really fascinating and really helps to understand, particularly if you've got physical, emotional stuff going on. So, coming on to how we can use these things that you speak about to look after ourselves. What's the wild approach, if you like, to people getting back into balance and finding good health?
It's, as a whole, as wild, it's about perception, because how we see the world shapes our thoughts, shapes our beliefs, shapes those filters through which we experience the world, which determines whether we have a pleasurable experience or not. And it's taking back the agency over that. But breaking it down then into the 4 letters, because it is an acronym, it's seeing the world through childlike eyes of wonder, which is the idea of glimmers that you may have heard some people talk about. That getting into those higher vibrations. As adults, I think we live in this society that talks about keeping pushing, that we feel our worth comes from our productivity rather than from who we are. And it can lead us to feeling stressed in a chronic way when our bodies are actually only designed to be in fight or flight for 10 or 15 minutes at a time. So these changes are going on. We're getting full of all these kind of acidic chemicals and stuff, the inflammation that you talked about earlier. And we can feel detached. We can feel cynical. We can feel jaded, depleted, exhausted. And that shapes our perception, versus if we can have those childlike eyes. You just think of a child. I've got a new granddaughter who turned 1 yesterday, and you look at her and she's just, everything is new and everything is exciting and everything's something to explore and to play with and to have fun with and to learn about. She's just a little sponge. And I think when we can get back to that, when we can look at the sky again and go, wow, look at the stars, look at the moon, look at a leaf, taste a coffee, taste chocolate, taste whatever you really enjoy and really enjoy it. Do that kind of mindfulness, really experiencing the world and how wonderful it is. And I read something years ago about how amazing it actually is that each one of us is here. If you think of all those sperm that didn't meet an egg, all those eggs that were never fertilized, all those eggs that were fertilized that never made it beyond a day, 2 days, 3 days, or never came into being a baby, grow up into adulthood. How amazing is it that we are actually here and that we get, I think nowadays, this was not how I used to think, but I think we're here to enjoy, bring joy into our life, to experience it to the fullest, and to uplift ourselves and everyone around us through that, to encourage people, give ourselves and everybody else around us permission to have fun, enjoy life, Play. Don't take it all too seriously. Be the person you were born to be. Don't worry about being a second-class somebody else. Don't worry about being a sausage in a sausage factory. Let yourself be you. The world needs you. That's why you are here, whoever you are. So I think our purpose is to be as me as I can be, as you can be, because we all bring our own unique individual gifts.
Yeah, very inspiring, very clear as well. Yeah, that journey, I've often heard it, life path is to find joy, to pursue the pursuit of joy and self-understanding, and also to grow through your single greatest self-limiting belief that you may. Some people believe we bring into this life, if you believe in the soul and soul journey stuff. Otherwise, other people maybe it was came into our life in childhood stuff that came up, whatever it is. But
and it doesn't really matter. It
doesn't really matter what
that challenge.
It's semantic. But if you recognise this, there is this self-limiting belief that's holding you back from being your optimal full self. Then you work on that, and things start unlocking, and the weirdest stuff then starts happening. The synchronicities the doors start opening, and you don't have to try. You think to yourself, "God, I really need this service, this person, this bit of help." There it is. Your next email comes in. It's just bizarre. So, but thank you. Yeah, and because of time, we need to just make sure we cover. So the W, wonder, childlike wonder.
Yes.
Well, tell us about ILD briefly.
Yeah, I is that listening to your body. It's your intuition, your inner knowledge, your inner learning, your inner knowing. L, loving ourselves. There's that thing that goes around every so often saying, you've been beating yourself up for how many years? Has it worked? Let's try loving ourselves instead. For who we are, for who we aren't. Because we get all these messages, you should be this, you should be that, you should be this size, this shape, this whatever. You're you, and you're beautiful and you're miraculous. Love it. Enjoy it. Appreciate it. Feel it to its fullest. And D is dance. I had somebody come to me quite recently who said, life at the moment is like one step forward and 10 steps backward, actually, she said. And that was how I used to feel. Like I would be moving forward and then, I'd be pushed back again. But if life is a dance, does it matter? It's just, we go with the flow. We go with where life takes us. We listen to the tempo, we listen to the beat, we listen to the energy, and we go with that and we experience it. It's not a competition. It's not a test. We can't fail. It's just be. Give yourself permission to be and to enjoy that being. And no matter what the tempo or the music or whatever is going on, just look for, well, what is learning for me in this? And enjoy it. And because I take a lot out of nature for what I do and what helped me, then Wild reflects that as well. That natural world in which we live, that we're interconnected and interdependent with, and our nature, our own human, individual, unique nature.
Amazing, beautiful. It's fantastic. Building of a system, if you like, a way of looking at the world. Wild, I think it's great. And so your work, you're a speaker, you're a one-to-one coach. As you said at the beginning, you do workshops and things like that. And I think you've done some writing as well, haven't you?
I have, yes. My book is just turned a year old.
Oh, beautiful. What's the book's name?
It's called Take a Walk on the Wild Side.
Very good. And we can put a link in the show notes for people to find it. Can they find it online on Amazon or anything like that?
Yes, it's on Amazon. And for those in the UK, it's on Waterstones online as well. And people can get it from my website. So a few options there, because I know that some people don't like using Amazon.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. And we'll put all those links in the show notes for today. So, we've got, sadly, because of how passionate I am about the kind of work that you're in, could go all day, but time won't allow us to do that. So before we finish, is there anything that you feel really is a lovely takeaway for people to look after themselves Is there anything that you would, what's the change you want to see? What's the big takeaway, or anything that you feel like you need to say, communicate, but we haven't got to?
I think probably following on from the conversation that we've had, the biggest takeaway I would love to share is your body isn't broken. Your body is always seeking to serve you. If it's not currently comfortable, that's just a little nudge, a little invitation to lean into, soften into, explore. And I'm all about getting curious with compassion, because so often we've been asked why, and it feels very confrontational. And if we then think, what's wrong with me? Why do I feel like this? Just sit with how that feels versus, oh, that's interesting. I'm feeling that way. I wonder what message there is within that for me. If I'm feeling an emotion, what's the need behind that emotion? How can I address that? So knowing that our body is biological and it's very wise and it's always just seeking to serve us. So how can we work with it and have that dialogue with curiosity and compassion and let it guide us and see where that takes us versus pushing against it all the time, because that hasn't served us.
No, beautiful way to sort of bring things to a point. And yeah, I know Dr. Gabor Mate's sort of process, compassionate self-inquiry. It's a nice way of sort of saying it is, lovingly asking the questions, but getting curious. I think that's been a big sea change for me. Is the expression "wit in," what is that in me? So whenever I'm triggered by something, whether it's anger, fear, or whatever, okay, what button is that pushing? What is that in me? So we look within, and that's the same for physiological stuff. Okay, I've got inflammation in my knee. What is that in me? What is coming to me? And actually, some of the probes we talked about, EFT tapping and other somatic experiencing and massage and all sorts of wonderful things are out there to support our bodies. Ultimately, it's a call for attention and focus. And if we listen, if we stop just for a minute from the sausage factory and the fight flight sort of daily sugar fixes and caffeine, if we just slow down, you can hear stuff. And then when you can hear and see, you can solve and support. Yeah. So thank you, Robyn. Your work is fab. You've got the book, you've got the speaking stuff, you've got the coaching. Wonderful workshop you did on burnout last night for us. So there's a lot there, and your personal journey. Thank you for sharing it. We'll bring things to a close for today. Robyn, thank you for joining us, Robyn Harris, and for everyone at home, thank you so much for taking the time to listen. You can find Robyn's info in the show notes, and just have a wild life out there, and some wonderment, some inquiry, and some love and some dance and some it's fantastic. So thank you, Robyn.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's been wonderful chatting with you.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you on the next podcast. Take care.